Chapter 22. The age of sail dies slowly. As years passed, Nate came to know the fabled ports of the world. Ezra taught him the handling of men and ships and the ways of trade. He could look at a teacup, a live tiger, or a locomotive, tell the value of each, and where it should be placed in a ship's cargo. He became a noted captain in a new shipping company. Ezra had saved the money he got as a skipper, added it to the savings of others, and bought the clipper from her owners. Ezra's company soon owned shipyards, several clippers, storehouses, wharves, and a few steamships. Long before Ezra was born, the first steamboats had churned up and down rivers and seacoasts. Later, when old salts argued that it couldn't be done, those banging, belching tea kettles were crossing oceans. The age of sail bloomed in glory with the clippers, but though for a time they were faster than steamers, the smoking monsters passed them when they were becalmed. Besides, steamships wasted no precious hours tacking against wind. They plowed a straight furrow, reached port, and left again on time, scorning any breeze. The company's vessel, skippered by Nate, was a steamer, but with masts, yards, and sails if the engines broke. When Nate felt happy, he called his ship the Halfway, half steam, half sail. Seabird, as mascot in his chart room, sometimes heard him call it other names. Thunder! Seabird, he'd say. Can't I look at the sky without catching an eyeful of cinders? I hate coal smoke. Hang it, Seabird, I'm a man of sail. And so, when the wind was headed his way, Nate Brown hooked onto it. Kill the engines, he'd call. Shake out her aprons. While the grinning mate would say, sails do save coal, and the engineer gives us time to tidy up the machinery, and sweating firemen with their helpers, 'tis sure wonderful when the skipper lets us rest and leans on the silent wind. Seabird, Nate would ask, and what are you saying? Are good ships doomed to wallow in smoke from now to the end of time? Why can't men just fly on the wind, up and into the sky? Chapter 23. Some people grow to be machines. Nathaniel married and had a son, and, just as in the days when Ezra set Seabird above Nate's crib, Seabird now hovered over the cradle of James. The baby's eyes seldom left her, following the swinging dance of her wings. When Jim was 1 year old, Grandfather Ezra carved ships for him to sail on puddles. At 2, Jim sailed with Seabird and Ezra on catboats. Going on 3, the baby chatted with Seabird, naming different types of sailing craft in the harbor. But at 3 years, bright little James Brown lost all interest in sail. Ezra and Nate took him down to the pounding, hissing engine room of a new steamer. He stood on the throbbing iron floor, still as a lump of metal. Only his eyes were alive. They followed leaping pistons, jigging crossheads, galloping connecting rods. Then the watching men saw Jim's small body begin to jerk, until fists, elbows, feet, and knees were keeping time to the moving machinery. In his excited dance, with round cheeks puffing, Jim had turned himself into an engine. "Dad!" yelled Nate. "The company has lost a sailor but gained an engineer." At 6, Jim left Seabird at home when he played in the shipyard shops. At 8, he made a metal steam engine model. At 10, they fitted him out to sail on the steamer with his father. However, Nate planned to spend some time in running the ship. The boy's questions long since had worn him down, so a young man was hired as a teacher to continue Jim's studies. From his wide veranda overlooking the bay, Ezra watched the ship's funnel vanish from sight. "A brainy boy," he said to himself. "Aye, he'll be a great credit to the company some day. But even at 10, I'm afraid he has outgrown Seabird." On the steamer, Nate had the same thought. Jim had bolted Seabird to his cabin wall, yet he seemed to ignore her. Nate once said, "Seabird helped me to know the sea. Are you glad she's yours? Aren't you glad Grandfather carved her?" "Of course," said Jim. "You know I admire odd inventions." Chapter 24. A Matter of Bridges. In Europe, James made notes on how things were built, from ancient palaces to modern steel bridges, and he haunted shipyards. One evening, as the ship was anchored off Italy, Jim said to his father, "Those models of ancient galleys we saw, I wonder how fast the old ships went." "As fast as aching muscles could send them," replied Nate. "This Mediterranean Sea is a nest where ships were hatched. Egyptians built some of the first. Their boats were copied by others, until even our steel ship holds many of the ancient inventions. One thing, though, we have changed. We use steam. In the old days, when the wind wasn't right, slaves rode galleys to drumbeats. Bullwhips cracked on the bare flesh of men chained to oars. Thunder! Jim, you talk about building such things as bridges. War and trade have always traveled on bridges of sweating human backs." Jim was 12 when he saw his grandfather again. "Did you learn things?" asked Ezra. "Think you'll rebuild the company's ships?" "Maybe someday, sir," Jim replied solemnly. "And yes, sir, I learned things. Father and I had a little talk. Off Italy it was. I got to wondering about all the slaves and common sailors who had worked on ships. One evening I looked at Seabird and thought, you saw Grandfather slaving on the whaler. You saw Father slave as a clipper's cabin boy. Do sailors work hard today?" To find out, I worked with deckhands, coal passers, firemen, oilers. In a month I could say to Seabird, "Men work hard today, even on a steamer." "So," said Ezra, leaning back and staring at Jim. "And what did you decide?" "Well, I decided that someday I'd build engines running on oil, not coal. Firemen and helpers won't shovel, they'll just turn valves. And I'll plan ships so sailors can have better cabins, better food, and more pay for what they do." "Strange talk," said Ezra, from a boy. "And I thought you'd outgrown Seabird." Chapter 25. Old Birds Find New Wings. When James Brown became a man, he was known not as a great sea captain, but as a great ship designer. His last vessel, now being riveted together with chattering hammers in the yards, would be run by steam engines burning oil. No coal would roar into bunkers. No men in hot black caverns would shovel like mad. It would take a big parade of whales and months of back-breaking toil to fill those, laughed Ezra, pointing his cane at the huge petroleum tanks. And Nate laughed with him. Imagine firemen merely turning shiny valves. No coal smoke, no cinders in the eye. And James said quietly, better cabins for sailors, good beds, better food and wages. Jim's son was born months before this ship was launched. Kenneth, they named him, Ken for short. Newspapers made much of the fact that Ken, the fourth generation of this famous family, had been born a full century after Ezra's birth. The papers ran in big type, and the great-grandfather still living. Ezra, in his crowded office corner, read this and smiled. You bet he's living, he said. And he's gone to celebrate, in a plane. Ever since I saw that ivory gull, I've hankered. You're going to fly? Cried Nate. At 100? I always promised Seabird that I'd fly. I'm going with you. At 73? Said James. Now I'm 37, but... The newspapers ran extras with huge photographs. Great-grandfather, grandfather, and father of the newborn heir of the great shipping company had all flown in planes. 4 of the company. Ezra had held Seabird. On the day the new oil burner was launched, Seabird was hung above Ken's cradle. The glistening ship made the ancient sea seem new. And in much the same way, Seabird was made young again. Time after time, she had started to grow older with her last companion. But before she could grow too old, new eyes regarded her with wonder. At that instant, her youthful magic was renewed. Once more, the old world became a fresh new place for living. In this way, Seabird could never grow really old.